we are indeed in the beginning of a new Hijri Islamic year. The year, this year is 1443. And so we need to speak about what's the history behind the Hijri year. And we are in the month of Muharram. And Muharram month is a very special, very important, very historical month. We need to understand what's so special about it. Inshallah, in this brief khutbah, I'll try to be short and with ijaz, but try to inshallah cover as much as possible. Bi'idhnillah azza wa jalla. We say 1442, 1443. This kind of dating and having a date system and a calendar system wasn't always there. Because we don't say, for example, that the Prophet ﷺ was born in the year, this Hijri year. Because there was no Hijri calendar back then. Arabs before never had a calendar system like that. In fact, they used to remember events by something big that happened that year. For example, the Prophet was born in the year of Fil, the year of the elephant. Because there was the incident of the elephant that came from Yemen and tried to destroy the Kaaba and all of that. And that was the year that was remembered by. There wasn't an actual 1, 2, 3 system. So when did this system begin? We find in history that during the time of Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu arda, Umar was the second Khalifa, the second Caliph. He was one of the greatest supporters of the Prophet ﷺ. He was one of the organizers of Islamic civilization. In fact, if anybody wants to see the epitome and the best example of Khilafah, the best example of Islamic civilization, they should look at the time of Umar radiallahu anhu arda. He was the one that organized so many things: the postal system, the benefit system, the pension system, the child benefit system, the roads, so many things. The army, the military, having a fixed wage for the military, having all of these systems for local, even policing and safety and security. All of these systems, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu pioneered and began. And they were then, of course, of benefit to the whole of humanity and the whole of the world. Umar radiallahu anhu in his time, in his effort to organize everything, some of his, sort of Ashuraa and those who were giving him advice, his close companions, other Sahaba, they said to him, we don't have a way of tracking the letters that come to you. And when things are written, there isn't a date system. So we should begin a date system, a calendar system. And so they had a discussion, and shura and mashwara is from our Islam, وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ, to discuss things in a group of experts before we make a decision. And this is what we do in Darul Ummah again and again for big decisions. And this is what the Sahaba and the Prophet ﷺ have shown us. And so he had a shura discussion in which they agreed, yes indeed, this should take place, and the year should have a beginning. And when should be the first year? So 2 issues: what month should be the first month? Second issue, when should this year or this calendar begin from? So they decided, some suggested that the year should begin from Dhul Hijjah, because it's the Hajj season. And some suggested it should begin from the time of other special events like Ramadan and etc. But eventually they chose the month of Muharram. And before that, Muharram wasn't the first month of the calendar, because there was no calendar to have the beginning or end of. And so they chose Muharram because Muharram is the month in which Hujjaj, they return from Hajj, fresh and new, cleansed and purified from their sin. And they begin a new life. And just like the Hujjaj begin a new life after Hajj, it is as though the beginning of every year should also be a new start for every believer, that we try to improve ourselves and have a plan, have a goal, have a resolution to get better in our religiosity, in our spirituality, in our education, in our physical health also, inshallah. And so they chose the month Muharram. As for the year, when should be the first year of that Hijri Islamic calendar? There were discussions also, should it be the year in which the Prophet ﷺ was born? Should it be the year in which the Prophet ﷺ went to Mi'raj? Or should it be the year when the Prophet ﷺ went from Mecca to Medina, done the Hijrah? And so they decided it should be the Hijrah that marks the first year of the Islamic Hijri calendar. Why? Because Hijrah is when really things changed. And when Islam began its higher levels of success, when there was safety and security, the Prophet and his companions had a country and a place to call their home. They had safety, and they were able to send da'wah to the vastest and the most furthest parts of the world. And they had the command of Allah for protection. And so many amazing things happened after Hijrah. And so they chose that Hijrah, the year of the Hijrah, should be when the year begins. So Muharram, the first month, and the year of the Hijrah, the first year. And so we have the Hijri calendar when the Hijrah took place. Muharram is the first month. Why they chose Muharram? There are many virtues of Muharram. Allah talks about the months of Islam in the Quran. He says that Allah has chosen 12 months in the year, and from them 4 are hurum, 4 are sanctified, sacred. And the Prophet ﷺ's hadith, especially the hadith and the incident of when he spoke to the Sahaba in the Hajjatul Wida', he said that the 3 of the months are consecutive: Dhul Qa'dah or Dhul Qi'dah, Dhul Hijjah, and Muharram. They come one after the other. These are all sacred. And also Rajab of Mudar, or Rajabun al-Asam, another name for Rajab, is also one of the sacred months. As for Muharram, it is the only month which Allah or the Prophet ﷺ in his hadith connected it directly to Allah. He never said Shahrullahi Ramadan. No, of course we know Shahr Ramadan alladhi unzila fihi al-Quran. But as for Muharram, is the only month about which Islam and the Prophet ﷺ said Shahrullahi, the month of Allah Muharram. The month of Allah Muharram. And so ulama speak about this, and they ponder, why is it that this month was called the Shahrullah al-Muharram? Al-Imam Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali rahmatullahi alayhi writes that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, one of the symbols of Muharram is fasting of Ashura. Right? Fasting of Ashura. Other ahadith teach us he used to fast in this month more than any other month. So fasting was a key feature of Muharram. And the month of Muharram has been called the month of Allah. Fasting is as-sawmu li wa ana ajzi bi. Fasting is only for the sake of Allah. And so just like fasting is only for the sake of Allah, it is suiting the month in which the Prophet ﷺ chose to optionally and nafilatan, he chose to fast more, that this month should be connected to Allah's name, Shahrullah al-Muharram, and Sawm also, which is directly in ibadah, only for the sake of Allah. Of course, every other ibadah is also for Allah, but Sawm is something that you can't, no one can see except for Allah. Your sadaqah people can see, your salah people can see, your hajj, but the Sawm no one can see. So that's one of the qawls as to why this was called Shahrullah al-Muharram. Nonetheless, it has been sanctified and specialized in this way. When the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina after his hijrah, in Medina there were many tribes living, namely 2 Arab tribes, the Aws and the Khazraj, and 3 Jewish tribes, the Banu Qaynuqa', Banu Nadir, and Banu Qurayza. They were Jewish tribes, and how they ended up there is also a historic event. Nonetheless, they were of course following the Jewish religion, and when the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina, he saw that they were fasting the 10th of Muharram. And so he asked them, why are you fasting the 10th of Muharram? They said, this is the day in which Allah saved Musa from Fir'aun. So the Prophet ﷺ was impressed by this. He said, we are also going to fast this day because we have a more closer connection to Musa ﷺ than anybody else, because we follow the true message with which he came, which is Tawheedullah, La ilaha illallah, and following the Prophet of the time and the Sharia of the time. And so we will also fast it. But the Prophet ﷺ said towards the end of his life that if I were to live another year, I would fast 9th and 10th. As for the virtue of fasting on the 10th of Muharram, the Prophet ﷺ said that this is the day, if you fast one day, Allah, inshallah, Allah will forgive a year of your previous sins. Allahu Akbar. And these sins are the minor sins that Allah Azza wa Jal, for fasting, that they will forgive your previous sins. And so you try. Allah, I spoke about this before in one of our previous khutbahs. It's amazing how Allah has sort of framed the time. That towards the end of the Hijri year, we have Ramadan, we have Dhul Qi'dah, Dhul Hijjah. Allah is trying to refresh, cleanse you. And then you start a new year, Allah is giving you once again another opportunity. Fast the 10th of Muharram and your previous year's sins also forgiven. So this is an opportunity that we cannot turn down, inshallah. Thursday will be the 10th of Muharram. We should try to fast it. It is older from the sunnah to fast the 9th. So as for fasting, has got 3 stages, 3 categories, 3 levels. First is to fast 9th and 10th, or all 3 if you can. Second is to fast the 10th and the 11th. This is also warid in the hadith. And if you cannot, then even fasting one day is also still good, still from the sunnah. There's nothing wrong with that, as has been mentioned and clarified and sort of opined by Imam Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullah alayhi, and Ibn Hajar al-Haytami and others, that is as is known. So trying to fast and trying to start afresh, trying to become a better believer, are all consistent, are all things and actions of the month of Shahrullahi al-Muharram. It is the day in which Allah saved Musa. It is also the day in which It is mentioned in the ahadith, Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahmatullahi alayhi mentions in his musnad, that it is the day in which the ark and the boat of Sayyidina Nuh eventually stationed and found its resting space and place in وَاسْتَوَتْ عَلَى الْجُودِ, the Mount Judi, and that's where it landed. And so there are many historic successes and great events that took place in this month of Muharram. As for what happened in Karbala, and some of our fellow brothers who follow the thread of Shi'ism and not from Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, what they do, for example, some of the bid'ah and some of the things that they do, for example, of striking oneself and others. This, of course, Karbala Karbala is the name of a place. It's a mixture of Karbun wa Bala. It's the name of a place where Sayyidina Husayn radiallahu anhu was murdered, became shaheed. That's true. It happened on the 10th of Muharram, but that's not the reason why it's virtuous. Why it's virtuous? Because Allah says, Inna iddat ash-shuhur 'inda Allah 12 shahra, and the ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's not why we fast. It's because of the ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So historically, this incident did happen. It's something that saddens the entire ummah. The grandson of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who he used to love so dearly, was murdered on this day. But this is no excuse or no reason for us to harm ourselves or to start new forms of bid'ah or innovations which are not found in the Sunnah and the teaching of the Prophet ﷺ. What's found? To fast. What's found? To change, to become better, to become closer, to improve, to have goals, to have plans, to become a better person physically, in your health, in your well-being, to become a better person in your education, to have educational goals, to have spiritual, imani, ruhani, ibadah goals as well. May Allah give us the tawfiq and understanding. وأقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. نحمد الله حمد الشاكرين ونصلي ونسلم على النبي الكريم محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We must appreciate the success of our young children who've received, mashallah, many young men and women from our Muslim community have achieved amazing grades in their A-levels and in their GCSEs. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. Well done to you all. Congratulations. Marhaba, marhaba. Well done to you all. We are so proud of you. And this is exactly what we want for our younger people, for all of us to be successful. And whatever we like, whatever we are good at, as long as it's within the Sharia boundaries, within the halal limits, we should exceed and excel. So well done to you all, mashallah. And as long as you're seeking knowledge with an intention to help the Muslims and your ummah and your family, this is also a form of ibadah. So well done to you all. May Allah raise you from ranks to rank, from success to success. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. May Allah forgive our sins and accept us all. Allahumma rabbana zalamna anfusana وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. اللهم اهدنا واهد بنا واجعلنا سببا لمن اهتدى. اللهم أيد الإسلام والمسلمين وانصر إخواننا المستضعفين في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم انصر إخواننا في اليمن وفي الشام وفي فلسطين وفي كشمير وإخواننا الأغور في الصين. اللهم يا الله ارزقنا الأمن والأمان في أفغانستان. وصل اللهم وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وأقم الصلاة.